we to judge and say, you're going to hell? So, 2/3 of Latinos, 68%, identified themselves as Catholic. 15% were born again or evangelical Protestant. 8% did not identify with any religion. For the great majority of Latinos, God is an active force in everyday life. Most Latinos pray every day. Most have religious objects in their home. And most attend a religious service at least once a month. Latinos have a distinctly ethnic characteristic of that, having services now being given in Spanish. 2/3 of Latinos say that their religious beliefs are an important influence in their political beliefs. This is why when George Bush won, there's something about the party and life issues, abortion issues, really connected through the Latino experience. More than one half say that church and other related services should address the social and political questions issue of the day. So you can take what you want from this, but I think people need to look at what is the underlying factors that's created this dilemma for many in the community to address, kind of thing.
Well, I think you set the predicate because you either believe or you don't. Okay, you can't second guess, and if you believe in a divine being, these things are happening for a purpose. You either believe in good and evil, or you don't believe at all. And so, if you believe in good and evil, you have to define or decide what's good and what's evil. There's a devil and there's a God, so to speak. And so the occurrence of the phenomena, if you're a believer, has to be the work of a divine work, and whatever's happening within the occurrence that is evil has to be the work of the devil, okay? And so that's why I believe that all of a sudden we're having, if we take the United States as a whole, if we look at the United States and its present situation with respect to gridlock, and you look at the United States and it's how the special interests have taken over and have globalized our economy, which has manifested itself in the need for cheap labor. Where Mexico has an abundance of cheap labor, and our economy in the United States, because they globalized, and somebody had to do that. Now that's either the work of the devil or the work of God. But you have to believe that if you're a spiritual person. If you believe that people who are gluttonous, people who are selfish, people who are like pharaohs, when Jesus Christ came upon this earth, he came for a purpose, Moses. He came to let his people go. Now, who were the people he was trying to free? He was trying to free the slaves. Now, we have modern day slaves that is put in by modern day pharaohs. God punished the pharaohs by doing certain things, by creating certain environments. That's if you're a believer. If you're a believer, a religious believer. And so this is what I got out of my epiphany, was that the globalization, where we have these modern day pharaohs called the elite, and they control Washington, in fact control the world, and they created this economic condition where they moved and they created slavery all over the world for the benefit of a few elitists, and created a global market for cheap labor, which demanded that the need for packing house workers, agricultural workers, people who now in construction and that, and you created this tremendous influx of immigrants. And that has a direct impact on the church, a negative impact. Now, again, you have to see the church in good or bad, and you have to look at the historical essence of the church, and whether or not the church was always, or is it a political structure, hierarchy that has within it its own elite. And I mean that's why the Pope and the way he acts is so critical to the masses, and that is he's flying in the face of tradition, and that to me he's saying while I have the power to continue the tradition, or I have the power to go against the tradition, and I have all of this news media, satellites, Twitter, everything else that's going to help me change the world, which is what he's doing and answering directly. So I look at even what's going on here locally. It's either good or bad. It's either the work of the devil or the work of God. And you cannot blame it on happenstance. It is not happenstance. And so therefore, if you are a Moses, if you are a soldier in the battle against evil, and you pray every day, you cannot be a bystander. You can't sit on the sidelines and hope that somebody comes by with a canoe and helps you out of the flood. You have to be part of the answer. That's why getting involved in politics, in voting and stuff is so critical, because God's not going to come down and help you. You have to help yourself.
Right. Another significant thing is that the roles Latino plays in U.S. politics and public affairs are deeply influenced by the distinctive characteristics of their religious faith. Latino evangelicals are most conservative than Catholics on social issues, and more likely to be Republican. Latino Catholics are more likely to be Democrats. But somehow, in my experience, in my interactions, somehow we don't want to mix religion with politics. We really don't want to mix religion with a whole lot of other social issues. I believe it's called liberation theology that comes from South America. I remember there were some Catholic nuns that were marching with us during the Chicano movement, and that was put to an immediate halt because of this fear of you're not supposed to be acting.
You're going to upset the status quo.
And I think with the changing demographics and all the issues that we're going to speak about here, the church can no longer stand still. The Catholic Church in particular. You have to start reaching out. My challenge to you all is how do we begin to understand what is going on? And we can't have this dialogue as a Catholic just on Sunday morning or during your confession. It has to be on a daily, emergence, serious communication pattern. If not, that exodus is going to continue in mass kind of phenomenon. So tonight's program hopefully is a start for one to begin to call and call up your priest, call up the bishop. Can we have a meeting with you? My goodness, to talk to bishops, and this may be a stereotype, you have to go through bureaucracy. Really? my husband is cheating on me, I'm being abused, and you're telling me, well, go back home and work it out. I hear on radio this morning on NPR about the nuns, that the Pope, the former Pope, is taking on this class of nuns in the United States because they want to speak out.
The former Pope.
The former Pope.
Yeah.
Want to challenge probably this institution of being a nun, one of the most dedicated, heartfelt individuals on the planet, because of the stance they're taking. And that could be grossly mistaken, but I don't think so.
Primo.
Jesus, is my understanding, was the most radical person
There
that ever came. And he changed, but as we as poor members of a congregation raise our hand and say, why does the church, and why did you, and why this, we're not acknowledged. Will somebody please explain to me that issue?
I like that, the part you put. But you're setting the predicate real good, because, and the Pope, what you're talking about the nuns, right? I mean, that's beautiful, because the Pope, what's the first thing he did? He went up there and he washed somebody's feet. Now, who was that? I mean, that was just disgusting, wasn't it?
Right.
But what did he do by doing that? He went against tradition. He dared to go out and do something that took him off the high perch and made him part of the normal. This is what you're asking for.
Right.
You're asking for them to meet with the priests or the diocese and say, look, talk about us, deal with our issues. The Pope, he even dealt with the gay issue. I mean, imagine that. He talked
the word gay.
He talked about the pedophiles. Right. I mean, and nobody talked about the pedophiles. This Pope, to me, is godsend. He is, because if it would not be for this Pope, I think he's sent to save the Catholic Church. I really do. Now, on a local level, what would happen if a priest went and washed somebody's feet right there in the parish? You know, you've been to South America? You've seen those little shanty towns, towns.
Yeah.
Poor. This man walked among the poor in the shanty towns. He went among the masses in downtown Brazil, one of the most dangerous places in the world. He walks among the masses, just like Jesus Christ did. You know, he's going against tradition, which has been the problem all along, and that's exactly what we're asking, what you're asking of the Catholic Church. And he's, como decían en español, uno pone la muestra. ¿Qué es la muestra? The model, the pattern. Él está poniendo la muestra. And that speaks beautifully to what you're saying right now. And the Pope, the titular head of the religion in the whole world, he's doing it. And they should follow his pattern, his role. But we have an obligation, I think, as the flock, so to speak, is to take up the mantle here locally and force our bishops and our priests to do the same thing.
You know, as we begin to try to ask the questions of understanding, I think it's imperative, because it's a very complex concept, religion. But I think we have to look at the rituals, the celebrations, the physical representations. We have to break down and have this dialogue. And this is an interesting phenomenon. I talked to a few priests who are just beyond themselves, that cannot understand why a poor or an immigrant family would spend $10,000 to $15,000 on a quinceañera. But if you never go ask and you don't look at what we were talking about, what this quinceañera means to that immigrant family, it's not about $10,000 or $15,000. It's about what my daughter and the tradition of a quinceañera really believes, rather than condemning in disgust kind of phenomena. So these are cultural beliefs. These are traditions that are so profound that we will die and fight for these traditions, no matter what.
Remember what we were talking about before the show? That the system that you and I were brought up into, you know, that we in the Chicano movement, because the system that we were brought up in with and taught within, they did not include us. They didn't include our culture nor our traditions. The culture and the traditions that we learned was something else, a different model. And so in order for us to survive in this world and still maintain our integrity and our self-esteem and motivation, we had to look towards our culture and our traditions.
Right.
And that helped us to self-identify and self-determine. But we also said that the people that ran the system were suffering, and I think that the priests fall in that same, I think the Catholic Church falls into that same dilemma, where they lack the sensitivity with respect to culture and tradition. That's why they question la quinceañera. And they will question any thing that they don't understand with respect to culture and tradition. And as they evolve and new priests replace other priests, they're going to have to relearn and relearn, because that same model that was there that we grew up has never changed, but yet our demographics have changed. But a quinceañera today is probably even more powerful, even more in vogue than it was when you and I were growing up.
Right.
I don't even remember quinceañeras, to be honest with you.
Right.
And I remember celebrating the 16th of September, not Cinco de Mayo, although we're going to have a big 16th of September. But Cinco de Mayo is a thing, you know. So those are, not that they haven't commercialized that, but it's a really good point that you're making there in the cultural and traditions and the distinctions between the priest and the Catholic Church and the culture and traditions of their constituency.
Right. And again, back to this understanding that you have to understand, and I would venture to say that if somebody did a study and compared all that we have spoken tonight between poor Latino people, middle class Latinos, and upper class, to see how this would begin to address these issues.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that is very significant in all of this. Because you have to have that detailed, and I mean detailed, through dialogue, through back and forth communication, if we're going to understand the Latino religious aspect as we go into the future. Because one thing, as the new Pope is demonstrating, that he senses that something has to be done and addressed to especially a Catholic education tradition that goes back to Jesus. And that's hard to do. But I think the Catholic Church is putting itself in an interesting quandary. Because if they don't begin to address these and other issues, then I think we're really going to have a total transformation in the religiosity of Latino communities.
So Marty, what do you think? I mean, keeping God in mind, you know that's the issue. If the Latino community does trend towards Pentecostal or charismatic, is that going to change the politics? You think is that going to have an impact on
The outcome?
yeah.
Sure, because like I said, that I'm not sure what the Pentecostals and the Charismatics do in their services, but if the research is valid, they're more conservative and they're very vulnerable to politics and the Republicans. And so, yes, you cannot deny that. I mean, the Democratic Party cannot continue with their ostrich syndrome. You know, they stick their head in the ground and we don't know what you're talking about. We don't know what you want, but give me $10. And when they come up every 4 years, everything's to be all right. You guys are talking about immigration, you're having forums, you're having voter things, and then they go back down. That has to change, kind of phenomena. So yes, most definitely, it's going to affect the political landscape of this country.
So it would behoove the Republican Party.
All parties.
Yeah, but I mean, just looking at the ideology and the conservative diatribe that they, the conservative mantra that they put forward of the values, and that it would behoove, because I believe that they're victims of the same system.
Sure.
that try to teach us and keep us out of, that they don't understand our culture and our traditions. But I wholeheartedly agree with the fact that if the Pentecostals and the Charismatics do tend to be more conservative, that they would be a natural fit for the Republican Party mantra. And again, that's where we don't want to say that too loud, though, because they might sneak up and snatch a bunch of our Pentecostal Latinos. We gotta talk to the Democrats too and say, this phenomena is occurring in our community
right before your eyes.
Right before your eyes, and maybe that's a reason why we have such a low turnout. Now let me see. That's a religious. What did you call it? A religious phenomena or religious? You started out with some kind of religious
transformation.
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 Okay. But that impacts not only politics but everything.
The economics, the communities, the education.
Education, right? Everything. Yeah, and so now, how is that gonna impact? If we in fact get illegal immigration to be legal, if they pass immigration, is that going to have a?
Well, I think that this bulging Latino youth phenomena is catching the attention of everybody. I'm not sure they're too concerned about you and I, who are now senior citizens, But this growing population, you have young Latinos, fantastic Latinos, successful, brilliant Latinos that are not going to sit back and say, no te apures, porque Dios te va a cuidar. They're going to say, really? Well, since I can't talk to him, I'll talk to you. And so what are you doing to address what the Charismatics and the Pentecostals are addressing? Because faith